All right, everyone, we're going to go ahead and get started. I know people may be joining in the next couple of minutes, but we have a critical mass here. Just a couple reminders. This is going to be recorded. So if you don't want to be recorded, you might want to sign off. But if you don't want to take notes, it's an easy way. We'll post this to the website, send this out through various socials so that you can listen back to what we're going to cover today. I am very excited today. I've got with me a guest that is very seasoned behind the camera, just like myself. So it's nice to be the interviewer instead of the interviewee. Pleasure to have Will Rosellini, a fellow Italian, a fellow private school boy that grew up with a brotherhood. So Will, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and listen, before we get started, I do have to cover some forward-looking statements just to cover us because Will and I don't like the color orange. So we may be making forward-looking statements throughout today's presentation. MDB Capital Holdings is a publicly traded company for which PatentVest is a subsidiary of MDBH. So we just ask that you refer to the company's latest filings with the Securities and Exchange Commission at sec.gov for the risks and uncertainties that can be associated with forward-looking statements, and then keep up to date with those in our periodic filings with the SEC. I do also want to let you know that today we have the Q&A function enabled. We want this to be interactive, so as questions come up, throughout this conversation, I just encourage you to go ahead and populate the Q&A function with those questions so that Will and I can see them and just naturally cover them in the course of this conversation. So with that being said, I do want to give a warm welcome again to Will. He's got a pretty impressive resume for those of you that are not familiar with him. Way more ambition in schooling than I have. He has his law degree, an MBA, and 4 masters, if you can believe that or not, in accounting, regulatory science, bioinformatics, and neuroscience. In addition to all that, he's also a very successful entrepreneur. Started 5 companies, has completed 3 acquisitions, raised over $200 million in financing, and has had 4 successful exits. So, Will, pleasure to be able to brag about you. But tell me, I usually like to start off with a personal question here. How does a man with so much success, so much experience, ambition, end up, what brings you to MDB and to PatentVest? How did you end up teaming up with PatentVest?
Yeah, thanks, Lou, for having me. So I was a former minor league baseball player that never could figure out how to throw his curveball for strikes in the big leagues. And so I retired at the ripe old age of 21, and I took advantage of Major League Baseball's college scholarship program. I was one of the few guys to do that. So in the course of my very long graduate career, I became the graduate student that professors trusted with their innovations and their technology when they were spinning up new companies. And so in the early part of my career, I had the great fortune to work with professors that invented groundbreaking technologies in the neuroscience space and in the imaging space. And I learned a lot about intellectual property, innovation management, how to do things properly, and how to do things in a way that created a lot of scars. And so that was kind of the early part. I met MDB Capital, I would say, about 10 years ago. Chris Morlett and MDB Capital, and I brought a deal to them. And they put it through their analysis and basically said very politely and with a lot of collaboration, this is a pass. And for me, that was a very surprising result given what I understood about MDB Capital. And so I got very curious about it. And I remembered kind of what Chris said to me in the evaluation is he said, you don't have a fundamental leadership position in your intellectual property. And at the time I knew that, and my idea was to build around that flaw in the business plan with the other things that were really exciting about the technology. In retrospect, that was one of my biggest failures in entrepreneurship was that company and that approach. And things always make sense looking backwards. I can point to that reason that Chris and MDB Capital exposed as the primary failure mode for that venture. And so since that time, I've thought a lot about that. When Chris and the team decided to institutionalize helping companies to develop that fundamental leadership technology position in PatentVest, I thought it would be a great place for me to come learn how this process works and then ultimately implement it for companies and CEOs like myself in my past.
Yeah. No, it's a great genesis story here. I think you've brought up a couple of things in mentioning how you got here. One, I want to focus on, it's understood that 95 to 97% of patents are worthless. Yet you and I have both built careers on this. I actually, for over a decade now, have been saying that patents are a leading indicator or a predictor of what's to come in the future, and their earliest sign of stock price appreciation. Because if you, traditional analysts will say it's earnings that ultimately determine stock prices, but before you have earnings, you have to have sales. Before you have sales, you have to have a product, and nowadays, before you have a product, you have to have patents. So come to me. What do patents mean to you? I mean, you've spent a career. Why are we bucking convention? If 95 and 97% of patents are worthless, then what are we doing different that makes us focus on the ones that are valuable?
Yeah, I think again, I've had a lot of exposure to what I would consider thought leaders in the IP space. And so in the beginning of my career, the focus was on university-based inventors that had the full force of US funding from grants behind their inventions, and then the university with a nearly infinite budget to protect those innovations. And you see all kinds of flaws and issues and problems with that, but that created unique ways to do arbitrage. In the course of developing those companies, I met Eric Spangenberg. And Eric Spangenberg is widely known as the biggest patent troll in the history of the space. And so patent trolling is the concept that the only value of a patent, it's not a shield. It doesn't protect you from anything. It's a sword. And so patent trolls and hedge funds that like Eric and IPNav focused on finding patents to monetize and to assert. And in that case, you really determine what patents are worth when you're in high stakes, high profile litigation and watching experts break down patent claims and patent matters under stress from opposing counsel.
And this is, for clarity for our audience too, a patent troll is a company or entity that acquires the patents and then looks to litigate to get infringement value from that, versus what we traditionally focus on is operating companies that have IP, right?
That's right.
Character. Okay.
Yeah,
just wanted to clear that up.
So they basically call themselves a non-practicing entity, so they can't be countersued, and they buy these patents. And there's been a lot of people that former Microsoft founders have tried to do this at scale. And it's an interesting way to go about extracting value from the patents. But the point of that understanding was, number one, it's not a lot of fun and it's not very rewarding to go through that. Number two, Chris and the team doesn't really believe in focusing on the monetization side, and instead believes that the patents need to be well constructed, which I learned in the patent trolling approach. But this well construction of a patent and a portfolio is actually the way that you need to play the research and innovation games. And so I got really deep into the academic study of how innovation happens, how it's protected with patents, and then ultimately how it's financed with venture capital. And it's really interesting because not only is MDB Capital doing things differently with the patents, they're also innovating in the venture studio and venture capital space, which is seeing huge shifts in LP and investment interest in terms of how are companies ultimately made and how are they utilizing their primary asset, which is patents.
Yeah, there's so many directions to go here. I mean, I could go down the line here on how we're different and better than traditional venture. That's a different approach, but I want to focus more on the value creation because I think that's the genesis of it. So you, in your background, first watching these patents litigated, what, in your opinion, what's the first step for generating value from patents? How is it in the strategy of development? Is it in the actual construction of the patents? What are the characteristics that enable the value creation?
One of the things that I've seen in understanding the value of patents is you have patent attorneys that are generally the smartest person in the class for all of their classes across the PhD and the law, and they're in this really esoteric world where they're arguing against patent examiners at the USPTO as their primary interaction. And so you get some really unique personalities that are patent attorneys who speak a totally different language. So you take that unique personality and put them with a totally unique personality, which is a person that says, I'm going to be an academic professor or an MD and not only do my job, but also create these wild innovations that are, in some cases totally unheard of. And you put those two people in a room and say, why don't you guys spend $1,000 an hour figuring out how to write really long documents that'll make other people money? That process is usually pretty flawed. And
Yeah.
so what I've seen and what I know that works better is a patent attorney can get you a patent on almost anything that you want. The value of that patent is somewhat up to debate. And so walking in to that sort of landmine or landmine and understanding the landscape of what's out there, and then having a strategy for what you want your patents to cover, not only today, but designing your research and development program in line with the patenting activity. That's where I've seen people extract a ton of value from their innovation engine.
So it's really treating the patent more as a business development and strategy plan versus just an asset of, hey, I've got to go get this, a formal certification that you've innovated something. It's really thinking.
What's fascinating is you can look at the patenting activity of your competitors, number one, and understand where's their white space that you can go innovate and invent. But then you have to be really careful to say, well, if I'm inventing in a space that no one's in, what am I missing? Why didn't they already do this? And so
Right.
it's a very important first step to say, if I'm going to invent something or I have invented something, let's make sure that there's some value there and that there's enough space to be able to create value in the future. And that's what's really unique. When you look at the different R&D games that you can play, a lot of what we've seen over the last 20 years has been fast cycle systems. So rapid development, short market entry times, pay a whole bunch of pay-per-click advertising to grab users and the values in the network. So when you look at the FANG type companies that have been built over the last 15 years, that's that system. And those systems have been funded with traditional venture capital. As the internet and those guys consume a lot of the innovation going forward, you're now looking at more discovery-based ventures in science and engineering. As biology starts to eat the world, in which not only are you doing lots of biotech for drugs, but you're using things like neuromorphic engineering to design chips. You use the brain to design different types of hardware, understanding how robotics can be better applied using different types of AI based on how the body previously did things. Biology is doing things in ways that is really interesting, but it has super long development times, potentially really difficult market adoption times, but there's a ton of alpha there if done properly.
So you're essentially arguing that over the last, call it, I don't know, since the internet boom, right? We've extracted out all the value to be developed from network-based systems, and now we have to move from a consumer network product technology to really deep tech. You're saying that the alpha exists in these deep tech innovations that are, largely in the life sciences, biotech, med device. I mean, would that be accurate? I mean, is that what you've seen the transition happen?
I think that you have to know what game you're playing, and so I'm not an expert in playing the fast cycle software iteration, find a customer, iterate, and throw advertising to grow to do a network, and so I couldn't tell you if there's a lot more to that. It strikes me that AI and the ability to do that quickly is going to eat up a lot of the margin in doing those types of businesses. But I'm quite confident the scale of innovation happening in the deep tech spaces, and deep tech is defined as you've got to make a scientific experiment or an engineering theory work, and then you have some value in your innovation. So it's the stuff that Elon Musk is doing. We're going to build a new rocket and see if it works. If it does, the company succeeds. We're going to make a brain implant, and if it works, then the company is going to succeed. Those types of industries, in my opinion, are, number one, rife with tons of innovation. There's not a whole lot of entrepreneurs that know how to play those R&D games. And then there's very few investors that are actively looking in that space because you have to have a lot more expertise and a lot more patience.
Yeah. No, look, I mean, it's music to my ears, obviously, because I joined MDB family of companies too around the same time as you, largely because I saw similar opportunities, but this was the only group that was focusing on that deep tech. So let me ask this. I often brag about our capabilities with PatentVest, that it is one of the only globally translated patent databases in existence, and that gives us a unique ability to assess where white space is, competition. Is that accurate though? Am I just, is that hyperbolic on my part, or in practice? I mean, from your vantage point, is it legit? Is it a tool that you find extremely useful and invaluable to what you're doing?
Yeah, I think that the technology stack is built explicitly for the process, and the process prevents the bias that is the company CEO or the company inventor saying, I have a hammer, it's the best hammer ever invented, let's just proceed as if there's no need to think about the strategy. The PatentVest process requires you to understand who's in the space, what they're doing in the space, why your innovation is important, how that problem solves something that's in a big market, and then most importantly, do you have the patents that will allow you to protect it when you invariably fail at some of your scientific experiments and have to change or broaden the scope of the product. And so those are the types of companies that are going to succeed in the space. You can see that with MDB's track record, but you can also look at just deep tech financing alpha compared to traditional VC. There is, if you do it right in that scale, you're going to get a better alpha. But if you're looking to develop these companies like I was doing for the past 20 years, this is a roadmap to stop the self-inflicted gunshots of a CEO trying to do, 10 or 12 different things in the business, while really trying to figure out a very complex set of strategies and interfacing with really smart people that have totally different languages. And so that's what we help those CEOs to sort through.
Look, and you've gone through that brain damage with CEOs. As investors, I can attest to the fact that a lot of us originally would just look on the analysis side and say, hey, the company has patents. And because of that, assume that there was value there. So same thing, like CEO says, hey, we have patents. It checks. It's more of a check the box. In business school, we were taught it's an intangible asset. There's no way to value it. We're saying the exact opposite, that there is a way to value, that there's if time spent evaluating and strategizing the development, it can be translated into value. But here's a question. I'll bring that all around to say to time. How long does it take? One, for you, if you're sitting down with a potential client of PatentVest, to assess the patent portfolio, and then two, to develop a strategy and patents that build out something that could be valuable and have leadership.
Yeah, the interesting part about the screening process is you can take a new analyst and in 3 to 6 months train them to understand whether a company has a viable patent portfolio and whether that could be a viable investment. That's
so 3 to 6 months. You firmly believe that? Like, as I'm sitting here,
it's even faster. Once you have that analyst trained, within an 8-hour session, they'll be able to generate a very comprehensive report that explains exactly when and how this company is going to succeed as an investment or not. It's really amazing. Now, I'm
reconsidering all my advanced degrees as well. So, I mean, if I look at it, that's one thing that's extremely useful. So that enables you to scale then, right? If you can train an analyst in 3 to 6 months on strategy, how to analyze, and then with an 8-hour session, that means you can look at a lot of different ideas quickly.
That's what I'm seeing, and I'm on the PatentVest side, so I get ideas that are broken, and we've got to figure out how to help put them into a technology leadership position. And so the screening is unbelievable, and I've seen that done. But when you send an idea and a company to PatentVest, there's a lot of well, first off, there's CPR to stabilize ongoing mistakes that are happening on an emergent basis. Then there's the innovation and invention process that says, let's protect stuff that you didn't even know was valuable. And then let's kill all of these projects that, for whatever reason, you guys are continuing to expend money, time, and energy on. And all that happens not just with the analysis and sort of the here's a white paper and here's a PowerPoint, but there's a ton of education that has to happen at the executive level to not only understand, well, here's what you're doing that you could be doing better. Here's where you're wasting time on things that aren't going to get you a return. And then here's where you need to be moving. And here's your competitors that are 6 to 12 months ahead of you. That's an education process. And it's a scary notion to go look at, okay, well, we didn't want to know what was around the corner. And if we don't look at it, then we don't have to deal with it. And a big part of the process is we stabilize your existing process, but then we tell you, you've got some big challenges and here's how we got to go face it.
How often you see resistance? Because I'm listening to you explain this. It's triaging, CPR. It's like old school medicine where we didn't know what was going on. We didn't have a view inside the body to diagnose. To now we do. How often do you get CEOs or management teams that are just resistant to accept what you're saying, that they're adamant that they know what they're doing? And how do you bring them across the chasm to accept that this is the way to generate value?
There's I've seen three types. The first is super busy, focused on, the next endpoint and the investors understanding the story and getting the stock price up or raising capital, and anything else that's not that is a distraction. And I've been that CEO for most of my career. That CEO has an education problem. Number one, they don't understand where they could be focusing better. They had a capital allocation problem. They're spending money that they don't need to spend money on. Either they're doing things in the wrong order, or they're not extracting the value in the right case. So that's kind of number one. And they just count on the fact that they're paying $1,000 an hour to a tall building law firm to handle their patents. And so they say, look, I'm spending the money. I don't have time to go figure out whether that's a good or a bad job from the patent attorney's perspective. The second is somebody that has a lot of innovation and a lot of ideas and a lot of pet projects in the team, and they don't have a good way of killing the programs. And so they've got a generational plan where they've got 15 different features across 3 different generations with no integration of regulatory, financial, or any kind of plan to get to these sort of gated endpoints, and then certainly no innovation map to make sure they're protecting things in a way that would be valuable to their competitors. And the last one is the CEOs that fundamentally disagree with the theory of how MDB and PatentVest believes that you should build deep tech companies, where they say, I don't have a fundamental leadership position now in the technology, but I'm going to win the race by doing it faster, and then I'll get patents as they come up. And so those CEOs are usually very sophisticated on the IP, and they're running a different type of strategy game. It remains to be seen whether they're going to do as well. What I'd come back and say is all 3 of those groups fundamentally lack the time and expertise to run the proper outbound campaign. So not only do we do things from an inbound perspective to fix processes and protect, we go get the market to understand by asking, would you like to transact with us? Would you like to do a license? And that market input, that KOL research, and that activity supplements the business development activities of the core team, and that extracts a whole lot of value for those guys.
So it's a couple questions here. One, I want to come back to the whole idea that some of the greatest innovators are the worst operators, right? So you can give them the information that says, hey, this is where you should focus on genius invention. Now you need to supplement with this skill set to get it into market. But you just said something about the biz dev, right? So this process that you're describing is not just diagnostic. Here's what you need to do. It's also forward-looking, going out and being proactive. Talk to me about that, how that implementation has happened with some of the early clients with PatentVest, where you've been able to give them insights into who might be good strategic development partners, and then spearheaded those and launched those initiatives.
Yeah, the more experience I get, the more I realize I don't know everything, which is a disappointing realization over time. But for now, the process that we run is really just that, the process. We're not delivering a set of advice and saying, good luck implementing this, this is the right answer. We're going through a process of discovering what the market is going to want from an innovation program. And so to that point, there's a little bit of art in understanding what and how to go get the information. But then also it's just work of going out and doing the calls, talking through the transaction, and actually presenting the education process to the potential licensee to understand what should be happening. And so we've done in a couple of our engagements, we've really pressed to say, look, we're confident that you've protected your IP. And this is the reason that you've said you don't want to go talk to your strategic acquirers too early, because they'll steal your idea. Well, we give you the confidence that you've protected the portfolio. Step 2, we've done the work. Based on the patenting activity, we know everybody in the space that's invested $1 because we read their patents. We also know, because they're patenting in that area, we know what they're interested in. And we're going to map their interests to what you have and start a conversation. And those conversations are going to inform what we do in the future, but they're also going to potentially lead to a transaction faster than you thought would happen. And we're seeing that with our early clients.
Talk to me about the significance of getting a law firm license in Arizona. How does that add another tool to the process that enables you to do what you're doing more effectively? Why is that required?
Yeah, we have sort of 2 sides to the business. One, first off, the state of Arizona allowed what's called this alternative business structure, which allows non-lawyers to own law firms, which isn't allowed in any of the other states other than Washington, D.C., which has a really nuanced approach. So why is that important? Well, PatentVest can operate like a law firm, but also can bring in consultants that focus on the strategic side. And by having an integrated process that basically says this law firm only protects patents that are commercially valuable and important to the business, we're a different, fundamentally focused law firm. That allows us to bring in people with different skill sets than patent attorneys focused on filing patents and getting to partner. And so we're sort of built from the ground up to be focused on that, extracting value from the innovation.
So extracting value from the innovation as opposed to extracting value from the company in the form of large hourly rates. So talk to me about how do you guys bill your services, right? So we're talking about an asymmetric risk return type of opportunity, or is it straight cash? Do you partner with businesses where there's some of its equity? Is it always public companies, private companies? What's the ideal client for PatentVest?
Yeah, we first off, we're very selective about who we take on because our process is such that we want to build billion-dollar technology leaders. And so we actually do a lot of screening before we take on a client. Once we do, we look at, okay, here's what you have from a patent portfolio perspective. We're going to be able to prosecute those patents cheaper, better, faster, that takes less time for you as the executive, because you're going to have a strategy consultant internal to the process that understands your portfolio better than you do. And so you're going to have a strategy person like myself overseeing a patent lawyer, making sure that they're doing the work that they need to do from a strategic perspective, but also because of the amount of background landscaping and analysis that we do, the patent attorney's ability to go right to writing claims and strong patents is way faster. And so we've been able to say, look, here's all this background information. Here's the strategy. Here's the landscape. Here's what everybody else is doing. Here's what's important. Here's the blue ocean space we want to go protect. Go write those claims. That's a whole lot less hours for that $1,000 an hour attorney to do. And we're able to do that at scale. That's the difference.
So do it at scale, you save time, you save money, you help actually identify value opportunities and then go monetize those value opportunities is in summary.
That's right.
Something, if I have an entrepreneur here, an operator, CEO listening, you're actually going to save money, time, and hassle for them versus being added expense.
And we have the capability to take on sort of eat our own cooking in the sense of we've taken equity in deals that we think we can take you from where you are to a technology leader, and we want to share in the upside.
Yeah, no, that makes sense because obviously people that are aware of our strategy, we try and take our fees and equity as well because we're quality over quantity. We want to curate the right opportunities that have the potential for tech leadership, which obviously is where the fundamental connection and collaboration comes in with PatentVest. Talk to me about the latest report. You guys are doing now, just kicked off a content series where you're putting out assessments of various opportunities or areas of the market of technology innovation. Talk to me about the most recent one you put out and why people should check it out.
So MDB has spent, I think, close to, I don't know, $3 or $4 million, maybe 15 years of development working in their patent database. So this is, I've worked with all of them. This is the most advanced database to be able to do search. And so what we do for every client is we start off with a comprehensive landscape across 4 to 5 different verticals within that. And then we update it for the client every 90 days. And so what we get to see is sort of where they are now and then what's happening in the space. And that can derive insights for those clients to say, here's where you need to be moving, you're behind. Well, what we've done in the industry that we're starting to cover is we can glean a lot of insights, generally, you know, in a medical device space or in a therapeutic space. And so we're publishing those insights on a regular basis to allow people to sort of, I think, benefit from a lot of really fundamental and critical analysis that'll have a lot of insights. And the pace of the innovation is so fast, there's just no way to keep up with it without these proprietary tools and quite frankly, a team that's able to do this at scale.
Yeah, and those are available on the website, right?
That's right.
If people go to PatentVest. And just so you know, the amount of money that MDB invested is like a great fishing tail. It keeps growing the more that we tell it. So you say 3 to 4 million. I've been here a little bit longer. I think I'm at 10 to 15 when I tell people. So needless to say, it's a significant amount of money that's gone into developing this tool. But I think it's important to talk to me before we get to questions. You know, people think patents, it's more scientific. You mentioned it before. There's an art to the process, right? There's a science to the objective evaluation of activity. what is that balance, right? So, I mean, what do we do differently? What have we perfected in our art side of the equation that others could not replicate?
Yeah, I think, from what I've seen, and I consider myself a little bit of an outsider because I've only been here a year and I've seen the process from the outside. What I've seen reminds me a lot of what made people successful in the Arizona Diamondback organization. They start with a whole lot of talent, and then they take a ton of ambition, and they work with the best coaches, and they work harder than everybody else, and they get lucky. And so what I've seen is you've got a group of people that is super talented, that's super ambitious, that's working around an IP-centric fund. There's not a lot of groups like this that say we're IP-centric and we're focused on this element of the IP space. Have coaches around that understand what that looks like and all the experience to say, no, we've already tried that. Let's go on and do it this way. And then work really hard with the right tools. So there's no secret other than MDB's been doing this for 25 years at scale, learning from mistakes, and sort of having a thesis that's pretty difficult to just jump into and figure out.
Yeah, and I always say that there's collective wisdom from that experience, right? Is that accurate? As you're landscaping wearables, for instance, which I think the latest report is the ECG marketing monitoring in the wearable space. Do you agree with that? That as you do the analysis, it's additive to the analysis you may have done 3 years ago, to where you can do things quicker over time, as the expectation, or understand things faster?
I think that yes, in the verticals that we cover, we're getting faster because knowledge is accumulating, and our ability to understand mistakes from other companies and history is getting faster. The collective knowledge of the team is also really unique in the sense that this universe is not infinite of companies that are trying to develop in the deep tech space. And so the institutional knowledge of, well, we looked at something like that 6 years ago, here's what we found. That certainly enriches my analysis for sure. As you kind of can harp on that institutional knowledge in your thinking.
So I'm going to open up to question and answers right now. If anyone has any questions, please go ahead and populate the Q&A tab in the Zoom software here. I am going to, as we wait for a couple questions to come in here, I'm going to ask you, one of the things I love about our company and group of companies is that it's not just about developing winning technologies or winning investments. There's always a human element to the things that we're doing. Our focus on enriching life in different ways, whether it's through the technologies back. But you guys do something unique with your PatentVest internship program, which I believe is kicking off soon. Can you just give us a quick overview of that? And if anyone's interested for their college age students, what they could do to get in touch about that?
Yeah, I've been surprised for a firm that's as busy and understaffed as they are. There's a lot of altruism to teach and to bring people on and enrich with internships. And so there's I went through the program and learned a lot myself, and sort of just saying, well, this is what you guys are doing for interns. Oh God. But it's a very comprehensive program to understand. It's not just IP, it's to understand the process of creating a technology leader, a new business, and then understanding how to analyze. And so it's a really excellent program I think they've gone through one cycle. There'll be another cycle coming up. But there's a lot of institutional effort to making the program better, and then also having a whole bunch of alumni that go out and start billion-dollar companies in the technology space.
Yeah. No. So if anyone's interested, you can get in touch with PatentVest on their website or email us at info@mdb.com. We can get you more information on that. I want to go through a couple questions that we have gotten here. Just from the standpoint, some of our listeners are obviously MDB Capital investors, and just curious about how big is the team right now in terms of number of clients that you can handle, and what's the vision over the next 12 to 24 months in terms of the capacity to take on clients?
Yeah, I think we're about 10 people at PatentVest exclusively. We've got a number of clients that were serviced from start to finish, moving into the second year. And so what we're doing now is really finalizing and hardening the core processes in the client service delivery. We've not done any outreach or sort of formal marketing to find new clients, in the sense of we're being very selective about the process to ensure, number one, the process is perfected, and number two, we're only taking on those clients that we think could ultimately become technology leaders and obviously potentially MDB investment candidates. And so I'd say in the next 12 months, we'd be able to scale the platform to 30 companies. I don't know that we'll find 30 companies that'll sort of fit the criteria, but from a scale perspective, we've got a pretty efficient process and we've got the talent to be able to take on. It's really just about what's sort of the right size of opportunities and how many good clients can we get that fit that thesis.
That makes sense. That's good context. Another question in terms of just, you look at a lot of different things, right? And you have a diverse background. I think I mentioned you have a master's in neuroscience and bioinformatics. What innovations are you seeing or areas of innovation that excite you about what's coming, what's ahead for humanity, for science, for the markets and potential investments?
Well, this is now totally off the PatentVest discussion, but I've long believed that you're going to have a human in the machine for a lot longer than people think. And so I think that the idea that you're going to have AGI and artificial general intelligence such that humans are replaced that's not even close. But I think that we're going to see integrated human machine elements that is going to blow people's mind in the sense of this technology is not only going to heighten what it means to be a human and to be a network of people that are connected by these computers, but it's going to change what computing looks like too. And that technology stack is just totally going to envelop the world over the next 20 years. Now, I have learned since I've been at PatentVest that synthetic biology might be even bigger. And I have very little experience in synthetic biology, but I spent an enormous amount of time on it, obviously because of what MDB is working on. And I am totally blown away by, number one, the scope of what that could change for gigantic industries. And so I walked in very interested in neurotechnologies and these kind of human-computer interfaces, but I'm getting more and more fascinated by the ideas that you could do with just pure biochemistry and enzymes. It's really been fascinating. So those are probably the two biggest things I think that have come out.
No, and that's super interesting perspective. And I would just encourage people to make sure that you go to patentvest.com and sign up for their newsletter, because obviously as Will and the team makes new discoveries or is focusing on different areas like this, that's going to come out and be reflected in the work that you share. Will, before we wrap up here, there's one question here. Actually, there's another one that came in. In your analysis, how do you handle a case where the founder's vision and concept is beyond the IP focus you see as cost effective? So maybe this is it worth it?
Yeah, it's always when you're meeting with the talented founder and visionary, their vision always extends past the capital that's available. And so it's a trade-off to say, we're trying to generate a business. The business has to innovate and compete and be better than all the competitors, but it has to do that within a capital strategy that is considered mature and able to generate a business. And so that tension of constraining the innovation into a reasonable plan is a big part of the success moment. Every one of my successful companies started with a rational strategic plan based on whatever kind of thinking you could do at the time. The only successful ones that I've been a part of are where the founder, visionary, inventor saved the company with a backup plan of innovation that they did in spite of the best plan. And so a big part of the deep tech journey in IP is you have to have your prime plan protected with patents, but make sure you have enough scope and breadth to be able to protect the backup plans. So that's what I would say is the founder's critical for that.
Yeah, that's good. Another question here, I'm going to save you because it's asking about what we can expect. Any words of wisdom on what we might expect from MDBH over the next 6 months? So, we cannot make predictions about our future stock price. I would say this. I think the discussion with Will today and understanding better what PatentVest is doing, his comments about synthetic biology should give you hope and understanding of the types of technologies we're evaluating as a company as a whole to finance in a completely different way than traditional ventures. So I think you're going to see the fruits of that labor that's been ongoing for years. And then since Will and I have joined, it's obviously a much more concerted effort to scale that up. So I think, as always, we're going to be judged by our results like Will and I have in our own careers. and then we will collectively be here. So more to come. And with that, Will, I want to leave last words to you. Anything that we didn't cover, you didn't get asked about, that you think is really critical for people to understand today?
I think that the MDB and PatentVest model is innovative, but becoming a lot more mainstream, because the way that ventures are funded and the way this technology is moving is going to require a different approach. And MDB's got a 15-year head start on how to think about it. That's why I'm here. And so I'll be really excited to see what kinds of things we get involved in over the next 5 years.
Well, great. Well, again, I want to thank you for your time. All of you that showed up live for this, I want to thank you for your time. If you want more information, again, I encourage you to go to patentvest.com to reach out to Will, Javier, and anyone else on the team, and we'll make sure that they'll make sure that they get back in touch with you promptly. So thanks again, Will. Thanks everyone else.